Cut the cameras now. Dr. Phil's voice cut through the studio like a knife through silence. The teenage girl sitting across from him had just finished a sentence. One sentence, and suddenly everything stopped. The cameraman froze. The audience gasped. Even the producers in the booth above went completely still. In 25 years of hosting one of television's most watched shows, Dr. Phil McGraw had stopped filming mid-episode only 3 times. This was one of them. The girl's hands were shaking. Her head was down. And on the small table between them sat a sealed white envelope that nobody in that studio or watching at home knew would change everything. What happened in the next 47 minutes would become one of the most powerful moments in daytime television history. But to understand why Dr. Phil did what he did next, we need to go back to the beginning of that day. Back to when a mother called the show desperate, terrified, and convinced she was losing her daughter to something she couldn't see or stop. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. 3 weeks earlier, Patricia Morgan had made the hardest phone call of her life. Her daughter Emma had always been the light of their family. Straight-A student, volleyball captain, the kind of kid who helped elderly neighbors carry groceries and volunteered at the animal shelter every Saturday. But 6 months ago, something changed. Emma stopped eating dinner with the family. She locked her bedroom door. Her grades plummeted. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. And Patricia found things, strange things that terrified her as a mother. Receipts for purchases Emma couldn't explain. Text messages that made no sense. Late-night phone calls Emma would hang up the moment Patricia entered the room. When Patricia confronted her daughter, Emma shut down completely. "You wouldn't understand, Mom. Nobody would." That was all she'd say. The distance between them grew wider every day until Patricia felt like she was living with a stranger who looked like her daughter but had become someone else entirely. The Dr. Phil show had been Patricia's last hope. She'd written a desperate email to the production team. "My daughter is disappearing in front of me, and I don't know how to save her." Within 48 hours, a producer called back. 2 weeks later, Patricia and Emma were sitting in a green room in Los Angeles, waiting to walk onto that famous stage. Emma had agreed to come only after Patricia threatened to kick her out of the house if she refused. The car ride to the airport had been silent. The flight, silent. The hotel room, silent. Emma hadn't said more than 10 words to her mother in 3 days, but she was there. And Patricia clung to that like a lifeline. The day of the taping, Emma sat in the makeup chair with empty eyes. The makeup artist tried to make conversation. "What grade are you in? Do you play any sports?" But Emma just stared at her phone, typing frantically, then deleting everything she'd written over and over again. When they walked onto the stage, the audience saw what they always saw on Dr. Phil: a concerned mother and a defiant teenager. The studio lights were bright. The cameras were rolling. Dr. Phil took his seat in that iconic chair and opened the way he always did. Direct, firm, but not unkind. "Patricia, you wrote to us that your daughter Emma is disappearing. What does that mean?" Patricia's voice cracked immediately. "I don't know who she is anymore. She won't talk to me. She won't tell me what's wrong. I feel like I'm watching her destroy her life, and she won't let me help." Dr. Phil turned to Emma. The audience could see it then. The walls the 16-year-old girl had built around herself. Her arms were crossed. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were fixed on a spot on the floor, refusing to look at anyone. "Emma," Dr. Phil said, his voice measured and calm, "your mother says you've changed. She says something's happened that you won't talk about. Are you willing to tell us what's going on?" "Nothing's going on," Emma muttered. "She just doesn't get it." "Get what?" "My life, my decisions, any of it." Patricia leaned forward, tears streaming down her face. "Emma, please. I'm trying to understand. Just talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about," Emma snapped. "Can we just go? This was a mistake." Dr. Phil paused. The producers were expecting this. Teenage defiance was common on the show. They'd film for another 20 minutes, take a commercial break, bring out a therapist, and by the end of the hour, there'd be some resolution. That was the format. That was how it always worked. But Dr. Phil McGraw didn't get to where he was by following formats. He got there by reading people. And what he saw in Emma's eyes wasn't defiance. It was terror. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. He leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped together, and his voice dropped to that tone, the one he used when he wasn't performing for cameras anymore, when he was just a man trying to reach another human being who was drowning. "Emma," he said quietly, "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Not with your mom, not with these cameras, with me. Can you do that?" Emma didn't move, but her hands, those shaking hands, gripped the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles went white. "Are you safe?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Patricia's breath caught. The audience leaned forward. Emma's entire body went rigid. "I'm fine," she whispered. "That's not what I asked." Dr. Phil's voice was gentle now, almost fatherly. "I asked if you're safe, and I need you to understand something, Emma. Whatever you're carrying, whatever secret you think you have to keep, it's killing you. I can see it. Your mother can see it. Everyone in this room can see it." Emma's lip trembled. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and she wiped it away angrily, like even crying was something she wasn't allowed to do. "You don't understand," she choked out. "If I tell you, everything falls apart." "Everything's already falling apart, sweetheart," Dr. Phil said softly. "The question is whether you're going to let us help you put it back together." For a long moment, Emma didn't move. The audience didn't breathe. Even the cameras seemed to stop, as if the entire world was waiting for this one 16-year-old girl to decide whether to let go of the weight she'd been carrying alone. And then, in a voice so quiet the microphones barely picked it up, Emma said 6 words that stopped the show cold. "He said he'd kill my mom." That's when Dr. Phil stood up, looked directly at the camera, and said the words that made television history. "Cut the cameras now." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. What happened next wasn't part of any script. It wasn't planned, rehearsed, or approved by legal. The moment those cameras stopped rolling, Dr. Phil walked across the stage, sat down next to Emma, not across from her, but beside her, and said something only she could hear. Patricia, sitting just feet away, saw her daughter's face crumble, saw Dr. Phil take her hand in his, and then her daughter nodded.
Phil put a hand on Emma's shoulder, saw her baby, her 16-year-old baby, collapse into the arms of a man she'd met 20 minutes ago, because she finally had permission to stop being strong. The audience didn't know what to do. Some were crying, some sat frozen. The producers in the booth were frantically trying to figure out what came next. But Dr. Phil wasn't thinking about the show anymore. He was thinking about the girl sobbing on his shoulder and the words she just whispered in his ear. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, Dr. Phil stood up. He looked at Patricia, who was pale and trembling. He looked at the producers, and he gave an order that sent the crew into controlled chaos. "I need the psychologist on set. I need our security team. And I need to speak with LAPD. Nobody leaves this building until I say so." Patricia's blood ran cold. "Dr. Phil, what did she tell you?" He walked over to her, his face grave. "Patricia, your daughter just disclosed something that requires immediate intervention. I can't tell you everything right now. There's a protocol we have to follow, but I need you to trust me. Emma is safe. You are safe, and we're going to make sure it stays that way." The white envelope on the table, the one Emma had brought with her, the one she'd been clutching in the green room, the one Patricia had seen her write something in that morning, was now in Dr. Phil's hand. "Emma," he said, turning back to her, "is this what you wanted to show me?" She nodded, unable to speak. "May I open it?" Another nod. Dr. Phil opened the envelope carefully, like it contained something fragile and dangerous all at once. Inside was a single piece of notebook paper folded twice. He read it once, then twice. Then he closed his eyes and took a breath that the producers would later describe as the longest breath I've ever seen him take. He folded the paper back up, put it in his pocket, and made another call, this time directly to someone the audience would never see. But what happened next is something no one in the room or watching at home saw coming. 20 minutes later, the doors to the Dr. Phil stage opened. Two people walked in, a woman in a blazer carrying a briefcase and a uniformed police officer. The audience stirred nervously. Patricia's hands went to her mouth. Emma, still sitting next to Dr. Phil, gripped his hand like it was the only thing keeping her from floating away. Dr. Phil stood and addressed the audience directly. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, something raw and real that broke through the polished veneer of daytime TV. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "what we're dealing with today isn't just a family conflict. It's a situation that requires immediate professional and legal intervention. Emma has disclosed information about ongoing abuse and threats to her safety. The authorities are here to ensure that she and her mother are protected moving forward." The audience gasped. Patricia burst into tears. Emma buried her face in her hands. The woman in the blazer, Detective Sarah Ramos from LAPD's Special Victims Unit, approached Emma gently. "Emma, my name is Detective Ramos. Dr. Phil called us because he's concerned about your safety, and so am I. I need to ask you some questions, but I want you to know you're not in trouble. You did the right thing by speaking up." Over the next hour, while the audience was asked to remain seated and the cameras stayed off, Emma told her story. Not the whole thing, not yet, but enough. Enough for the detective to make a phone call, enough for a warrant to be issued, enough for everything Emma had been terrified would happen to actually happen. But not in the way she'd feared. The man Emma had written about in the letter, the man who had been controlling her life for 6 months, the man who had told her that if she ever told anyone, he would hurt her mother, he was arrested that evening. He never touched Patricia. He never had the chance. It turned out Emma had met him online. He'd seemed kind at first, funny, understanding. He'd said all the things a lonely teenager wanted to hear. And then, slowly, the messages changed. The requests changed. The threats started. By the time Emma realized what was happening, she felt trapped. He knew where she lived. He knew her mother's work schedule. He knew everything. And Emma, terrified and ashamed, had kept it all inside, until the moment Dr. Phil asked if she was safe. When the detective finished taking Emma's initial statement, she looked at Dr. Phil and said something that would later be included in the official police report. "If you hadn't stopped that show, if she hadn't disclosed today, I don't know if we would have gotten to her in time." Dr. Phil sat down with Patricia and Emma one more time before they left the studio. The cameras were still off. The audience had been dismissed. It was just the three of them sitting on that stage that had hosted thousands of stories, but none quite like this. "Emma," Dr. Phil said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to hear me say this, and I want you to believe it. What happened to you was not your fault. The shame you've been carrying doesn't belong to you. It belongs to him. You are brave, you are strong, and the fact that you're sitting here still breathing, still fighting, that tells me you're a survivor." Emma looked up at him with red, swollen eyes. "I thought if I told everything would get worse." "I know you did, and that's what he wanted you to think. That's how these predators work. They isolate. You found a way. You spoke up, and because of that, you saved yourself." Patricia reached for her daughter's hand, and for the first time in months, Emma didn't pull away. "Can we go home?" Emma whispered. "Not yet," Dr. Phil said gently. "We've arranged for you and your mom to stay in a safe location for a few days while the investigation continues. And I've connected you with a trauma specialist, one of the best in the country, who's going to help you work through what you've been through. You're not alone in this anymore, Emma. You have a whole team of people who are going to make sure you're safe and supported." He pulled the white envelope out of his pocket and handed it back to her. "Emma," he said, You held on to this letter for a reason. You brought it here because part of you wanted someone to see it. I'm proud of you for trusting me with it." Emma took the envelope, stared at it for a moment, then tore it into pieces. "I don't need it anymore," she said quietly. Dr. Phil smiled. A real smile, not the TV smile. "No, you don't." Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. 3 months after that day, Emma and Patricia returned to the Dr. Phil show for a follow-up episode. This time, the cameras stayed on. This time, Emma walked onto that stage with her head up, her shoulders back, and her mother's hand in hers. She told her story, the real story, the whole story, to millions of people watching at home. She talked about the grooming, the manipulation, the threats. She talked about the shame and the isolation. And she talked about the moment Dr. Phil stopped the show and everything changed. "I thought asking for help meant I was weak," Emma said. "But Dr. Phil taught me that asking for help is the bravest thing you can do." The man who had terrorized her was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Emma started therapy and slowly, painfully began to reclaim her life. She returned to school. She rejoined the volleyball team. She started talking to her mother again, really talking, the way they used to. And that white envelope, the one she'd torn apart on stage, became a symbol of something she'd carried for too long and finally let go. Dr. Phil ended the follow-up episode with words that would echo in Emma's heart for years. "You didn't just save yourself that day. You saved every other kid watching who needed permission to speak up." Emma smiled. For the first time in a year, it reached her eyes. The studio erupted in applause. Patricia hugged her daughter, and Dr. Phil, the man who had stopped everything to listen, simply nodded, knowing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop the world long enough for one person to be heard.